Hi. So let's say you've been given some data to analyze, and somebody asks you, as they hand you this random bag of data, what is the most typical answer in the data? What's the most common number? In other words, what's the expected result? Well, there's three tools you can use to find this out: the mean, median, or mode. But it's up to you to figure out which one's the most appropriate tool. Well, most people are going to jump right away and calculate the mean or the average for the data. But hold on a second. Is that always the best way to go, using the mean? Let's have a look at an example. Here we've got a graph of some student marks. Let's just say this was the graph showing a very small math class. How many students are in the math class? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students. Pretty small. And how are they doing overall? What's the general sense of the class? Well, I'd probably say they're having a pretty tough time in this class. If you look at most of the marks, you have 32, 35, 30, 39, 37, 31. But somebody is having a fantastic time in the class. They have a mark of 99. This guy that's way far away from the other dots is what's called an outlier. And outliers are data points that really don't fit in with the rest of the pack. But let's see how this changes the mean. If you remember, to calculate the mean, we just add up all the values that we see there and then divide by the number of values there are. So I'm just going to start adding up all of these numbers. And then we get to the student that's having a fantastic time in the class. I wish I had 99s when I was taking math. And we'll divide all of those by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, again, 7 students. And I'll skip the calculator work, but I'll show you that the mean, or the class average, turns out to be about 43. And while that's still not great, 43 really doesn't seem to represent how the class was really doing, because when you look here, most of the students are all down in the 30s, in fact, the low 30s in some cases. But this outlier, the very high 99, pulled the mean up higher. So the class mean is 43. So in this case, when we have an outlier, the mean is not the best way to go. How about the median? You remember the median's the middle value. To find the median, I'm just going to start rearranging all the marks from lowest to highest. Just like this. Then we have 37, 39, and finally 99. So now what's the middle value? What's the median? Well, it looks like it's 35 because I have 3 numbers to the left and 3 numbers to the right of 35. So that's the median. 35 is a much more accurate representation of how that class was doing overall. So remember, when you have an outlier, chances are the median is the more accurate way to go. But what about the mode? Well, let's have another example. Here we've got a Canadian survey. And this survey just asked random teenagers, how do you feel about this statement? You have a lot of friends. Is that completely false, that you have no friends? A little bit false? You have maybe 1 or 2. Sometimes false, mostly true? Or is it completely true that yes, you do have a lot of friends? So could we use the mean or median for this case? Well, not really, because the answers aren't numbers like we have here on this graph where we're talking about marks. We're talking about a survey question. So really the only calculation we can do, or really the only analyzing we could do, is to use the mode, because it looks at what's the most common answer for a survey. So for this survey, what is the mode? In other words, what's the most common answer? Well, on a histogram or bar graph like we have here, it's easy. It's just the tallest bar. More people said true than any other answer. So the mode is true. So remember, the mode is a great tool for when you have answers that aren't numbers. But when we do have numbers and we want to look at what's the central value, if we have an outlier, chances are we're going to go with the median like we did here and find the middle term. If we don't have an outlier, then we can go ahead and use the most common tool, which is the mean. Okay? mean, median, or mode.